At the Compucare workshops last year, we announced that we were changing the way our development process works. Due to this, it means that builds of Compucare are being released a lot more rapidly. We found that for some customers, it was very difficult to keep up with this new release process. Therefore, we'll be doing 3 major releases a year, which will be supported by marketing videos like this one. We encourage that you try and keep up to date with the major releases so you don't miss out on the exciting new enhancements and all-important fixes. Don't worry, the minor releases will still be available and ready to load if you wish. Activities. We have added a new app called Activities to enable a recording of clinicians' patient admin time. You will need to link the activity to a patient and an episode of care, then you can also add a start and end time. The Activities app is its own code table, so configuration can be site-specific. Billing and invoicing. The latest build of Compucare provides some new enhancements for billing and invoicing. Firstly, Compucare now has the ability for a user to do a purchaser batch payment for multiple purchasers. This has been done by removing the mandatory field from the purchaser, so multiple purchaser payments can be made in the same batch. Now focusing on patient invoicing, when the user changes the payer against a patient invoice, Compucare will now default to today's date as the due date rather than taking the date from the original invoice. Finally, patient bookings can now be excluded from batch billing by using a toggle on the billing episode called Exclude from Batch Billing. This will be displayed as a warning that the patient is excluded from batch billing. If a booking is excluded from batch billing, then it cannot be batch billed from the interim billing or billing apps unless the constraint is resolved. This will be displayed in the warnings that the patient is excluded from batch billing. This function is also security controlled. Clinicians App. There have been some minor enhancements to the Clinicians App. When cancelling a booking which has linked bookings, the user will now see all the linked bookings and will be able to cancel the individual booking or cancel all linked bookings. The user is also now able to change the patient's membership number and the authorization codes on the billing episode. Clinicians View. The Clinicians View is a new module that has been recently introduced into Compucare. The purpose of the Clinicians View is to provide consultants with an easy-to-use app to record the required clinical information during a patient consultation. This includes requesting orders and pharmacy items, completing relevant clinical forms, and also recording any procedures. The Clinicians View can be launched from the People area, which would be the first screen seen by the clinician when they log into Compucare. In the summer release, one of the new enhancements to the Clinicians View is the ability to show the patient's location in the Clinicians View so that the clinician knows where the patient currently is. We have now added a last recorded activity to the patients which is visible on the Clinicians View. This will show the time, room, status and clinician that the patient was last recorded with. This is only for outpatients and outpatient surgical appointments only. Along with this, forms can now be specified against the clinician which will default in when completing a booking in the Clinicians View. These can be set in the People record under the clinician's role, as you can see on screen. By having a default form, when the clinician is using the Clinicians View, it will automatically be available. The final enhancement for the Clinicians View is the ability to configure the outpatient completion screen. If you would like more information on the Clinicians View, please contact our sales team. Contract management. In previous versions of Compucare, default contracts were able to be set for patient types, for example, inpatient, outpatient, or day case. In the latest version, we have expanded this to allow for hospitals to also set a default contract to a site. For those who do NHS work, this will also work for ERS bookings. Compucare will take the site from the ERS slot. Compucare will not allow multiple default contracts to be associated to one site. There are now more options available when using the attendance charge rule in contracts. You're now able to add an attendance charge to consultations. This is done by going into the child contract, then edit the attendance/cancellation charge rule item. As you can now see, there are 3 new fields: has procedures, has orders, and is clinician led. Has procedures works from the primary procedure, orders works for non-cancelled orders, and is clinician led works if there is a responsible clinician on the linked booking. Bookings. As a bookings user, you are now able to set a different default discharge time for day case bookings. This saves the user having to remember to change the discharge time on each booking. As you can see here, you are able to set a default amount of minutes or hours for a day case booking. If you require to change the time on the booking to be different from the default time, a warning will appear in the information pane on the right-hand side of the screen. The warning states that the time in the booking is different to the default time set up. You can choose to resolve the issue or save the booking regardless. EDI. Compucare can now process 0 payment lines in an EDI remittance, for example those which have been 100% shortfalled in value. This can also be done in a purchaser batch payment entry. This new functionality allows post actions to be performed when such payment batches are saved once import or entry is done. ERS. Compucare will generate a notification for administrators when the rebus messaging are not processing, and therefore no outbound notification messages from Compucare are being sent to ERS. This notification should indicate to the user that there may be an issue with Compucare's service and could need attention. The notification is titled ERS Rebus Queued Messages. The notification also shows in Compucare's Notification Centre. Outpatient and Inpatient Estimator. Hospitals are often asked by patients how much this procedure, scan, consultation, etc. might cost. While Compucare holds all of the pricing information, there is no easy way to provide the patient with a price estimate. Often this information is stored in an Excel spreadsheet. Due to this, we wanted to introduce the Estimator tool to enable this information to be more easily accessible. However, please be aware this is not to replace your CRM/sales system. To access the Estimator, simply search on your home screen and select the Estimator. There are separate screens for both outpatient and inpatient. For this example, I will show the outpatient estimator. Starting at the top of the screen, select the patient that the estimate is for. The system will then default in the date and site, however these can be amended if required. If the estimate relates to a specific clinician, they can also be added. If not, they can just be left blank. Then add the purchaser and related contract. This will ensure Compucare is pulling the prices from the correct contract. Then the user will need to add the charges that they require price estimates for, if the user is not looking for a fixed price package. Once all the charges have been added, simply select the Estimate button. Compucare will then run those charges through the billing engine as if the system was creating a patient invoice. Compucare will display to the user the total price estimate. The estimate can then be printed and given to the patient. Similar to other areas of the system, the printed estimate will be stored in the patient's correspondence record. There will be a phase 2 of the estimator, which will include items such as making a payment against the estimate and also converting the estimate into a booking. If you require additional information about the estimator or would like to provide us feedback, please get in touch. Forms. In the summer release, there have been quite a few enhancements relating to Compucare forms. The following enhancements have now been added. A new result type called Picklist Single Select Checked has been added to the form component code table. This will enable users to pick just one checkbox out of multiple options. When adding a form result, the top 10 recent filter on the drop-down has now been replaced with a top 50 used filter. This will display the current user's 50 most used forms over the past 6 months. Along with these enhancements, a covering letter can now be included when generating a form result report. This is achieved in the Report Designer app by entering the desired content of the covering letter into the report header section of a new or existing form report. Finally, when forms are launched into patient mode for the patient to use, such as the e-registration form, the patient will now be able to see the company logo on the electronic form. This enhances the appearance of the form and helps build the company identity. The image on the form is pulled through from the company that the user is linked to. Letter Designer. A new enhancement that has been introduced is the ability when sending letters through Compucare, you are now able to add additional documentation. To add the additional documentation to the letter template, simply go to the Letter Designer app and select the required letter. In the Info menu, select the document you wish to accompany the letter. The supporting documentation will appear as an additional attachment. In the Correspondence app, there is now a new column called Additional Document. If you choose to resend this correspondence, both the letter and attachment will be sent. Multi-bookings. For those customers who had Compucare 7 may remember the multimodality functionality. This has now made its way into Compucare 8 under the new name Multi-Bookings. We now have a new app called Outpatient Next Free Multi-Bookings. This allows a user to book multiple appointments at once with different configurations. For those who use the Next Free screen, this will be very familiar. There are 3 new fields that have been added: the minimum and maximum wait time and duration. Here users can set how long the patient's wait will be until their next appointment. As with a regular Next Free, you can add filters and then pin them to your home area to save time. Once you select the booking slots, you can now add in the patient details along with the other information that is included when you're making a booking. Multi-bookings are currently only available for outpatient bookings. With the introduction of multi-bookings, we have also improved the management of linked bookings. If a patient has linked bookings and a user wants to move or edit the booking, a notification will display. By selecting View Linked Booking, Compucare will display more information regarding the linked bookings. The same applies if the linked booking is cancelled. When selecting Cancelled, Compucare will provide the option to cancel either just the individual booking or cancel all linked bookings. The same will apply for DNAs. New UI. In the latest build of Compucare, along with a vast array of new enhancements, we've also introduced a new user interface. We've adopted for a cleaner, clearer and more intuitive design. We have created a video specifically to highlight the major design changes in this build. This is available now on our YouTube channel. Next Free. We've made some changes to the Next Free searching functionality. After selecting a consultant, room or equipment to schedule a booking for, the user is now able to select whether to include or exclude ERS slots. For those hospitals that do NHS work, this enhancement will allow them to use the Next Free searching without accidentally booking into an ERS slot. Nominal Mapping. In the latest version of Compucare, hospitals are now able to map nominal code by episode of care treatment function. This can be set up by going into the Nominal Code app and adding a name and patient mapping, which now has the treatment function control. We have also added an enhancement to allow the ability to differentiate between NHS work and private through the introduction of a purchaser category to patient mappings. Order communications. There has been a vast array of new enhancements to the order communications functionality that features in the summer release. These include the following: the ability to add file attachments to a patient order, enabling the ability for walk-in radiology patients to be recorded without the need for an originating booking against a service request. Theatres can now have more than one modality recorded against them. When creating a surgical booking, the user is able to specify a theatre with multiple modalities which will allow for orders to contain multiple service requests. And finally, enhancements to protocolling. Focusing on the enhancements that make up protocolling, when adding an order, users are now able to add a requesting reason/justification, which can be seen on screen. These reasons can be added via Reasons Code Table. In addition to the ability to add a requesting reason to an order, we have also added the option to state whether a service request requires protocolling before being scheduled. As you can see, there is a toggle against the service request, which when set to yes, will flag that the protocolling is required. The service requests that require protocolling will now need to be accepted/approved before the order can be scheduled. A new field has been added when adding a service request that requires protocolling, which is booking instructions/notes. The order screen can be filtered by those who require protocolling. As you can see, I'm not able to schedule the service request until it has been accepted. Upon accepting the service request, I am now able to schedule the booking. Pharmacy and prescribing. Over recent bills, there has been some changes to pharmacy and prescribing since drugs administration has been introduced. The following enhancements have been introduced to support the prescribing aspect of Compucare. Users are now able to multi-dispense. The enhancement will only work when clinical mode is switched off. However, as a safety measure, if any item being dispensed has an expiry date, then the multi-dispense will show a warning and will not carry out the dispensing. The user will have to individually dispense the prescribed items with the expiry dates. For pharmacy users, we've added a default for the prescribing clinician. If a clinician has been recorded against associated booking, it will be defaulted into the prescribing clinician field. This enhancement should save the user from entering the same clinician twice, but also will be left blank if the clinician does not have permission to prescribe. Users will still be able to record a different prescribing clinician to the one associated to the booking if required. For those clinicians that use Compucare, they are now able to access the Prescribed Items app from their person area. When prescribing an item, the prescribing clinician is defaulted in from the person area that you are in. This is not changeable. If a user without a clinician role tried to access the Prescribed Items app through the person area, they will not be allowed to unless they have the clinician role. When adding a prescribed item, if the drugs are not to take home, the user will be able to record a route for the drugs to be administered. This is not a mandatory field, and as you can see, when I select the patient is taking home their drugs, the route field is no longer visible. Provider charging. We have introduced a new Provider Charges app. This is very similar to the Patient Charges app. The enhancement has been added as a way for users to be able to add provider charges quickly. As you can see here, we can either add, edit, bill or delete charges from within the app. You are able to save the charge or save a new if you're adding multiple provider charges. When using provider charges, the user is able to either select or bill charges. Once the charge is billed, you can print or post the invoices. If it is a single invoice that is being billed, the user can take payment or just view the invoice. In addition to the introduction of the Provider Charges app, we have also enabled the ability for the option to import provider charges into Compucare. Purchasing. This release includes an enhancement for the ability to set reorder levels per store. Users can now set minimum, maximum and reorder levels per item per store anywhere you can edit bin. When adding a purchase order, the maximum level warning will now take into account if a store has any values against the charge item. To be aware, all of the change bins have now been renamed to edit bin. Scheduling. Just like on Outlook, Compucare users are now able to bulk delete suspensions when they've been created in bulk. When the bulk suspensions are made, there is an icon that appears in the top right of the suspension box. Where there is this icon, when the user right-clicks and goes to delete, they are given the options to cancel, delete selected, or delete all linked. This new functionality can be used in both outpatient and inpatient schedulers and will also include rooms and equipment. When printing outpatient clinic lists from the scheduler, the suspensions for clinicians will also now be shown against the outpatient bookings. This will work for both single and multi-resource scheduling. SMS Functionality. This build introduces some changes to the SMS functionality. There is now the ability to send SMS messages from the inpatient booking screen, both individually and in a batch. This SMS message can include the deposit amount required for the patient, making it easier to chase deposits prior to admission. Also, it is now possible to specify different SMS templates based on whether the booking is face-to-face or not. This has been achieved with a new addition to the patient notification settings on the SMS settings screen. Templates now exist under Outpatient Face-to-Face notifications and Outpatient Not Face-to-Face notifications. The relevant template will be selected when sending a notification. Finally, when a patient has multiple appointments on the same day, auto reminders can now be set so the patient will only receive one reminder per day per episode of care. Surgical bookings. Many of you will be very familiar with the post actions in Compucare. Many of these are able to be configured to the hospital's workflow. This has now also been extended to surgical bookings. Users who have the security profile to do so are now able to edit the post actions. This can be accessed through the cog on the post actions window. System. When adding a new patient, the gender field is now mandatory. Compucare will default the gender to be blank, so the user will need to select either male, female, or not specified. If needed, you are still able to edit the patient's gender by editing the patient, then select from the same drop-down menu. Theatre tracking. As a part of the summer release, it is now possible to record a theatre brief and theatre debrief against the surgeon's availability for that day via the Theatre Tracking app. Due to this enhancement, hospitals are now able to comply with the NATCIP's regulation by recording the theatre brief and debrief, which will be stored in Compucare. To create a theatre brief, simply open the Theatre Tracking app and select the first patient of the day. Once the theatre brief has been recorded, a theatre debrief form will then be available for the user to complete. If you start to track a patient through theatre without a theatre brief being completed, Compucare will prompt to say that it is required. The completed forms will then be stored against the clinician's availability to be reviewed as and when required. Waiting lists. When completing or cancelling a booking, if the patient is being added to a waiting list, you are now able to add a planned procedure. As you can see in the reading pane, there is a new planned procedure listed. The user can add or edit the procedure by editing the waiting list entry. This can be added to inpatient, outpatient, or surgical waiting lists. And as you can see here, the planned procedures have pulled through from the waiting list entry to the booking. For further information and any queries on the latest enhancements to Compucare, you can contact us via the email address and phone number now displayed. We will continue to upload release videos and how-tos onto the Streets Heavers YouTube channel, so make sure you hit subscribe to stay up to date. Thank you for watching.